The first sound I heard after 20 silent years wasn't my son telling me he loved me. It was him telling his wife that he was sick of babysitting a disabled old man and couldn't wait to be done with me. I lay there in that hospital bed, eyes half closed, pretending I was still deaf while they whispered about how they'd take everything I'd worked my whole life to build. That's when it hit me. My own family had no idea what was coming for them. If you're watching this, drop where you're from in the comments, because what happened next in that hospital room changed my life forever. The last sound I remembered before waking up there was the screech of metal grinding against asphalt, then nothing but blackness. When I finally came to in a sterile room at Colorado Springs General, I expected silence. After 15 years of living in a world without sound, silence had become my peace, my normal. What I didn't expect was to hear my son Daniel's voice slicing through the air like a dull knife. "I'm just tired, Jess. Tired of taking care of a deaf old man who can't even hear us anymore." Those words cut deeper than the truck that had slammed into my Ford. I stayed completely still, eyelids barely open, watching Daniel pace while Lauren scrolled mindlessly through her phone. "The doctors say he's stable," she muttered without looking up. But honestly, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. A blessing. My accident. My pain. They called it a blessing. I should have been celebrating. For the first time since that explosion on the construction site 15 years ago, I could actually hear again. The miracle I'd begged God for had finally come true. But all I felt was the cold stab of realization that my family saw me as nothing more than a burden they were stuck with. "The ranch is too much for him anyway," Daniel said, pacing near the window. 5 acres, that old house falling apart. He's 65, been deaf half his life, and now this accident. He needs professional care. Professional care. That's what they call dumping folks in nursing homes these days. That ranch wasn't just property. It was my life's work. I'd built every board of that place with my own hands back in '92. After my wife Margaret passed, that land became the one thing keeping me grounded. Now my son was talking about selling it like it was just another investment to cash out on. "What about the kids?" Lauren finally asked, setting her phone aside. "Ethan and Lily love their grandpa. They'll understand," Daniel said, though I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "It's not like he can really talk to them anyway. The communication barrier makes things complicated." Communication barrier. That's what I'd become. Not a father, not a grandfather, just an inconvenience. The heart monitor beside me beeped in steady rhythm, but my own pulse was racing. I'd survived a car crash, regained my hearing, and now I was lying here listening to my family plan my future like I wasn't even alive. The irony burned. I could finally hear again, but the first conversation I caught made me wish I hadn't. A nurse walked in, shoes squeaking against the floor. "How's our patient doing?" she asked. "Still unconscious," Daniel replied quickly. "Doctor said it might be a while." I kept my breathing slow, face relaxed. Something told me pretending to be out cold was the smartest thing I'd done in years. If they thought I couldn't hear, maybe I'd finally learn what they really thought of me. "I'll check on him later," the nurse said softly. "Sometimes these things take time." When she left, Lauren stretched and sighed. "I need coffee. This is going to be a long day." "Go ahead," Daniel said. "I'll stay with him." As their footsteps faded down the hall, I cracked my eyes open just enough to see Daniel staring out at the Colorado mountains. My son, the boy I'd taught to swing a hammer, the one who'd helped me pour the foundation of our home, was now plotting to tear my life apart. But he had no clue what kind of mistake he was making. You don't spend 30 years in construction without learning how to build something that can take a hit and still stand tall. And I was about to show him exactly how strong this old man's foundation really was. The game had changed. I could hear every word now, and they were about to find out that their silent, helpless father had been listening all along. 3 days after leaving the hospital, Daniel and Lauren moved into my ranch to help with recovery. They turned my living room into something that looked like a clinic. Pill trays on the coffee table, a wheelchair I didn't need, and enough medical supplies to stock a pharmacy. "Dad, we've got everything under control," Daniel said, speaking slowly and clearly like he always had. "You just focus on resting." I nodded the same way I always did, pretending to be grateful. Inside, I was curious what game they were really playing. In 5 years, my son had barely stopped by once a month, usually long enough for a quick meal before rushing off. Now suddenly, he was the devoted caretaker, putting on a performance good enough for an Oscar. Lauren was no better. She strutted around my kitchen like she owned the place, reorganizing everything and complaining about how messy I'd let things get. "Frank, I made you some soup," she said one afternoon, setting down a can of chicken noodle like it was fine dining. "You need to keep your strength up." That evening, I pretended to nap in my recliner while Lauren took a phone call in the kitchen. Her voice shifted when she thought I couldn't hear. Calm, sharp, calculating. "No, Mom, he's fine. Just a few bruises and a concussion," she said. "I know, but we need to be here. There are things we need to assess." Assess. That word hung in the air like a warning bell. Interesting word choice, I thought, hearing Lauren's voice drop to a whisper. Daniel joined her, and soon their words were just low murmurs I could barely make out. I cracked one eye open, pretending to be asleep while watching them huddle together like a couple of schemers plotting a heist. "Did you check the office?" Lauren asked. "Not yet," Daniel replied. "He's been awake most of the day. Then we wait until he's sound asleep." "Check the office." My office was nothing fancy, just an old oak desk where I handled bills and stored a few important papers. What could they possibly need in there? "What about the safe?" Lauren whispered. "I saw it behind the bookshelf, but I don't know the combination." My blood went ice cold. They were talking about my safe as if they had every right to open it. Inside were my will, insurance policies, and the deed to the ranch, documents that only mattered if I was dead or deemed incapable of managing my life. "We need to be smart about this," Daniel said. "If we move too fast, people might start asking questions." "I know," Lauren replied. "But we can't wait too long either. The longer it drags on, the harder it'll be to handle." I forced my breathing to stay steady while they hovered near my bed, checking that their patient was still peacefully sedated. "He looks comfortable," Lauren whispered. "Good," Daniel said. "Tomorrow we'll start going through his papers. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with." What we're dealing with. Not how to help Dad or what Dad needs. I was no longer family. I was a project, a problem to be solved. When they finally tiptoed upstairs, I stayed motionless, my mind racing. My loving son and daughter-in-law weren't here to take care of me. They were here on a treasure hunt, cataloging every part of my life to see what they could claim. The ranch I'd built with my bare hands. The savings from 40 years of work. The quiet life I'd pieced together after losing my hearing. To them, it was all just an inheritance waiting to be collected. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They thought their deaf old father couldn't hear a word they said. Tomorrow, I decided I'd start my assessment. And unlike them, I wouldn't be whispering. By the second week of their so-called care, Daniel and Lauren had settled into a polished routine that might have looked heartwarming to an outsider, if you ignored the calculation behind every move. Mornings came with coffee, forced smiles, and syrupy small talk. Afternoons brought fake affection and shallow gestures while I played my role as the grateful invalid. But the real show started when they thought I was napping. From my recliner, angled just right toward the office door, I could see them sift through my drawers like burglars in broad daylight. One by one, they combed through my life. Papers, folders, records, returning each item with precision so nothing looked disturbed. "Found the insurance policies," Lauren whispered one afternoon. "Life insurance, $250,000 plus accidental death." "Good," Daniel said, snapping photos with his phone. "What about the property deed?" "Still looking. Everything's tidy, but not labeled." I had to admit, they were thorough, even professional. If it weren't my life they were dismantling, I might have admired their teamwork. "Here it is," Lauren finally said, holding up a manila envelope. "Ranch deed. 5 acres, free and clear, worth about $400,000. "For 10, Daniel corrected instantly. They'd done their homework. "What about liquid assets?" he asked. Lauren laid my bank statements across the desk like she was dealing poker cards. "His pension comes in steady, but the balance is lower than it should be," she murmured. My chest tightened. "How much lower?" Daniel asked. "Based on the deposits, he should have around 120. Current balance shows 70. So 50 grand missing." "Not missing," Daniel muttered after a pause. "Withdrawn. Over the last 20 months. I knew exactly where that money had gone, into their lives. Daniel's failing construction business, Lily's private school tuition, Ethan's medical bills. Every dollar pulled out at Daniel's request, always with a promise to pay it back when things turn around. "Jesus, Jess," Daniel said. What if he's been giving it away? What if there's nothing left by the time we... He stopped, but I didn't need him to finish. By the time I die, we need to find where that money went, Lauren said sharply, and make sure no more disappears. How? Without making him suspicious? Simple, she replied. We take a more active role in managing his finances. For his protection, of course. A man his age, with his disabilities, shouldn't be handling large sums. My disabilities. 15 years of deafness, now twisted into a weapon to take my life apart. What about power of attorney? Daniel asked quietly. Already looked into it, Lauren said. We need him to sign willingly, or we'll have to prove he's mentally incompetent. And if he won't sign? Lauren hesitated. That silence was louder than any words. Then we explore other options. Other options? I didn't need a dictionary to understand what that meant. They put every document back where it belonged, whispering as if they hadn't just betrayed me completely. That $50,000 I'd given them out of love now served as proof I couldn't manage my own affairs. But they'd made another huge mistake, assuming I was too old, too deaf, too trusting to notice. They thought I'd never question their sudden devotion or push back once they made their move. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. It was during the third week that I overheard the call that turned my blood to ice. Lauren was in the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, voice low and professional. Daniel was out running errands, and she thought I was asleep. Yes, this is Lauren Sinclair calling about the incompetency proceedings we discussed, she said crisply. My father-in-law, 65, deaf for 15 years, recent car accident. She was careful not to use my name, but the tone said everything. This was official. No signs of dementia, she continued. But his judgments become questionable. Large cash withdrawals, refusing to discuss finances after the accident. We're concerned he can't manage things safely. Each word was chosen like a lawyer crafting a case. They were twisting my generosity into proof of instability, painting me as a confused old man who needed protection from himself. What documentation would we need? She asked, pen scratching across paper. Medical records, bank statements, witness testimony, got it. A pause. And once guardianship's established, we'd have full authority over his decisions. Full authority. Complete control. How long would that process take? 6 to 8 weeks, she repeated. Perfect. 6 to 8 weeks. That's how long I had before they could legally take my freedom away. The second call hit even harder. Golden Years Care Facility? Hi, this is Lauren Sinclair. I called about placement for my father-in-law. Her voice softened, rehearsed concern dripping from every word. Yes, the gentleman with hearing loss who had an accident. Golden Years. I knew that place. A so-called care home just outside Colorado Springs. Looked more like a minimum security prison than a place to live. We'd like to schedule a tour, Lauren continued. Preferably this week. We want him somewhere safe before his condition deteriorates. Condition? That's what they call me now. Not a man. Not a father. Just a condition to be managed. Before his condition deteriorates? I thought, bitter. As if being deaf was a sickness slowly eating my mind. Thursday at 2 would be perfect, Lauren said, jotting notes like she was booking a vacation. Yes, we'll bring him. We believe in transparency. Although he may not fully understand, Daniel added. Not fully understand. They already talked about me like I was a child. How much does long-term care cost? That includes meals and medical supervision, right? Lauren asked the admissions woman. Excellent. We'll discuss payment options, the woman replied. He has assets that may need liquidating. Assets needing liquidation. My ranch, my savings, the life I'd built, reduced to line items on a billing sheet. Daniel came back as Lauren finished the call. Through half-closed eyes, I watched her brief him. The lawyer says we need more documentation of incompetence, she said. I scheduled the Golden Years tour for Thursday. This Thursday. I heard Daniel say. That's fast. We can't wait, Lauren answered. Every day we delay, he could make things harder, give more money away, change his will. You're right, Daniel said. The sooner we settle this, the better. I'm tired of pretending to be the devoted son. Tired of pretending. At least he owned that. After Thursday, we'll have paperwork, facility arrangements, financial planning. By next week this will be resolved, Lauren said, like she was closing a deal. Resolved. As if I were an equation to be solved, not a man. They headed upstairs discussing logistics like military officers. I lay there still, listening. They'd shown me my future prison and started burying me alive with a deadline. That turned out to be their worst mistake. After 30 years of meeting impossible construction deadlines, I knew how to work under pressure. They'd given me a date, and I knew how to use it. Over the next few days, I stopped being the passive old man and became a planner. 30 years managing jobs taught me one thing about demolition. You need the right tools, perfect timing, and a complete understanding of the target's weak points. My family just handed me a blueprint for all three. Step 1. Documentation. While they played devoted caregivers, I set up an old digital recorder behind my recliner. It caught every whisper they thought I couldn't hear. The longer we wait, the more suspicious it looks, Lauren said on one recording. If anyone questions it, our story is solid, Daniel replied. We're protecting a disabled elderly man from his own poor judgment. Their words became my evidence. Step 2. Legal reinforcement. Using my bedroom phone while they were out, I called David Keller, a lawyer known in Colorado Springs for defending seniors. Marcus listened, steady and skeptical until I played the recordings. This sounds like elder financial abuse and conspiracy, he said after a long silence. How long has this been going on? 3 weeks since the accident. Financial theft goes back 20 months. We need to move fast. If they file for emergency guardianship, it'll be much harder to fight. Can you come by tomorrow? They think I'm helpless and deaf, Marcus. I'll be there, he said. Step 3. Financial protection. That afternoon, while Daniel and Lauren were touring Golden Years, I walked into my bank for the first time in weeks. The teller, Margaret Shun, was surprised to see me moving around on my own. Frank, we heard about the accident. How are you feeling? She asked. I wrote on a notepad, much better than my family thinks. Within an hour, I'd moved my life savings to a new account with 2-factor authentication. I changed beneficiaries, removed Daniel and Lauren, and named Ethan and Lily as primary heirs, with Marcus as trustee. Money secured. Step 4. Strategy. Back in my workshop, the place where I'd taught Daniel to swing a hammer, I laid out my plan like a foreman mapping a complex teardown. They wanted to use my deafness as leverage. I would use their assumptions about my helplessness to trap them. They wanted my money and to warehouse me. I'd make sure the right people ended up locked in a mess of their own making. That evening, as they fizzed with excitement about Thursday's tour, I finished the final prep. Marcus would meet me at Golden Years with legal paperwork ready to flip their ambush into their undoing. Recordings were duplicated and stored in multiple places. Assets were safe. Everything was lined up. After tomorrow, everything changes, Lauren told Daniel, heading upstairs. She was right. Things were about to change, but not the way she imagined. Their problems were just beginning. Sitting in my workshop, surrounded by tools that had built a life, I smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. I'd learned how to bring things down safely and completely. Tomorrow I'd use that skill on the people trying to tear me down. The morning of the tour came clear and bright. Daniel and Lauren fussed over final details, expecting my surrender. At 1:35 we pulled up to Golden Years, a beige building that looked half hospital, half prison. Linda Hayes, the admissions director, greeted us with practiced sympathy. She pulled out a notepad and wrote, "Hello, Mr. Frank. Welcome to Golden Years. How are you feeling?" I read it and gave the weak smile and nod I'd perfected over the years. "We're going to show you around. Let us know if you have questions," she wrote, and I flashed my trademark thumbs up. For 30 minutes, I played the part perfectly. I nodded at questions, smiled at activity lists, and let them imagine my consent. "This would be your father's room," Margaret said to Daniel, and then wrote for me. "This could be your new home, private bathroom, emergency call, garden view." Lauren scribbled notes. "It's perfect for you, Frank. Safe and comfortable, right?" She mouthed. I read the note and looked at the sterile little room. Bare, small, more cell than home. That was the moment I decided the performance had gone on long enough. "Actually, Lauren," I said, my voice clear and steady, "I think this place looks more like a prison for unwanted relatives than a care facility. And no, I don't think it's perfect." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Margaret's pen froze mid-sentence. Daniel's jaw dropped open. Lauren just stared at me like she'd seen a ghost. "Frank," Daniel finally stammered. You can hear us?" "Every word, son," I said calmly. "I've been hearing everything for the past 3 weeks." I reached into my jacket, and pulled out my little digital recorder, including all those conversations you had when you thought your deaf old father couldn't hear a thing. Margaret blinked between me and her notepad, unsure what to say. You've been able to hear this entire time? Crystal clear, I said. My hearing came back after the accident. I just stayed quiet when I heard what my family really thought of me. Then I hit play. Lauren's voice filled the quiet room. We're protecting a disabled, elderly man from his own poor judgment. That's our story. Lauren's hands trembled as she scribbled a note. Frank, please, we can explain. Stop writing, Lauren, I said sharply. I can hear you just fine. I've been hearing you plan to steal my ranch, drain my savings, and dump me in this place like yesterday's trash. I pressed play again. Daniel's voice echoed through the recorder. I'm tired of pretending to be the devoted son. I looked him in the eyes. That's when I stopped pretending to be the helpless father. Margaret dropped her notepad. We should probably end this tour. Actually, I said, glancing toward the doorway, you might want to stay. A voice came from behind her. Good idea. David Keller stepped in, briefcase in hand. I'm David Keller, Frank's attorney. We're here to address this facility's involvement in attempted elder fraud. Lauren collapsed into a chair, pale as a ghost. Daniel stood frozen, realizing their entire plan had just crumbled. You see, I said, standing tall with every ounce of authority I'd built over 30 years in construction. When you spend your life building things, you learn exactly how to take them apart. And you too? You just got demolished. Within hours, the legal machine I'd quietly set in motion began grinding my son and daughter-in-law into dust. Marcus hadn't just come to golden years with a few papers. He'd brought a full-blown legal assault, the kind that strips people bare of everything they try to steal. The first hit came before we even left the parking lot. Marcus handed Lauren a restraining order, banning her from touching my accounts, stepping foot on my property, or making a single decision about my care. The look on her face as she read those papers made every sleepless night worth it. This is insane. Lauren cried, her voice shaking. We're his family. We were trying to help him. Help him, Marcus said evenly. Mrs. Sinclair, we have 3 weeks of recorded conversations where you and your husband discuss stealing his assets, lying to medical staff, and committing guardianship fraud. I suggest you call your own lawyer, quickly. Daniel stood there, color drained from his face, finally realizing just how deep a hole he'd dug. Dad, please, he said weakly. We can work this out. Family doesn't sue family. Family doesn't steal from family either, son, I said. You stopped being my family the minute you decided I was worth more to you locked away than living free in my own home. The second blow landed that same evening. Marcus filed criminal complaints with the Colorado Springs police for elder financial abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Detective Rachel Alvarez showed up at my ranch just as Daniel and Lauren were packing their bags, court orders already giving them 48 hours to vacate my property. Mr. Frank, the detective said, reviewing the files Marcus had provided, this is one of the clearest cases of elder abuse I've seen. The recordings alone are enough to press charges, but paired with the bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals? She shook her head, disgust written all over her face. It's shameful. Marcus added, we estimate they've stolen roughly $50,000 over the last 20 months. Money Mr. Frank had originally given them voluntarily, money they then twisted into proof of his supposed incompetence. The third hit was financial. Within 24 hours, Marcus and I had filed civil suits demanding repayment of the $50,000, plus emotional damages, legal fees, and punitive costs totaling another $100,000. Their house, the same one I'd helped them buy 15 years back, was mortgaged to the edge. They had no way to pay me back. Frank, please, Daniel said as he loaded boxes into his truck. We messed up, but we're still your family. Where are we supposed to go? I don't know, Daniel, I said coldly. Where were you planning to put me when you shipped me off to golden years? Lauren stepped out of the house, clutching her last suitcase, tears streaking her face. We never meant for it to go this far. We were just desperate. Desperate enough to steal from a deaf man? I asked. Desperate enough to fake medical reports and lock me away so you could spend my savings? That's not desperation, Lauren, that's greed. The final blow came a week later. With their accounts frozen and no access to my money, they couldn't make mortgage payments or cover legal fees. They filed for bankruptcy. The bank foreclosed on their house. Their credit was destroyed. The small business Daniel had been trying to prop up with my money folded completely. Marcus called me with the update, his tone almost satisfied. They've lost everything, Frank. The house, their savings, their credit rating. Daniel's working as a bookkeeper now, making a third of what he used to. Lauren's got a retail job. And the criminal case? They've agreed to a plea deal. Probation, community service, and full restitution. That's what the judge gave them. Marcus told me they'd be repaying me for years, assuming they could even hold steady jobs long enough to make a dent. I sat in my workshop that afternoon, the same place where I'd once taught Daniel how to drive a nail straight, where we'd built birdhouses and fixed old furniture together. The smell of sawdust still carried memories, and the irony hit hard. I'd spent decades building him up, giving him the tools to succeed, not just the ones you hold in your hands, but the ones that build a life. And in the end, I'd had to tear him down to protect what mattered most. But sometimes demolition is the only way to make room for something better. Some structures rot from the inside, so unsafe that the only option is to bring them down completely. Daniel and Lauren had become that kind of danger. And now, with them gone, I could finally start rebuilding. A month later, I was back in my shop sanding a cabinet door when I heard voices calling from the porch. Grandpa Frank. Ethan's voice, uncertain, still boyish, but deeper now. I set the sander down and walked to the front door. There they were, Ethan and Lily, standing side by side on the steps. Ethan had shot up since the last time I'd seen him, taller, shoulders broadening. Lily's face had thinned, the roundness of childhood fading into something stronger. They looked like their parents, but there was honesty in their eyes, something their mom and dad had long since lost. "Can we talk to you?" Ethan asked. "Of course," I said, opening the screen door wide. "You're always welcome here." Lily burst into tears the moment she stepped inside. "Grandpa, we're so sorry. We had no idea what Mom and Dad were doing. We never would have." Hey, I said, pulling her into a hug like I had when she was 5. "You didn't do anything wrong. This mess is between me and your parents, not you." Ethan lingered by the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets. "But we should have known something was off," he muttered. "The way they talked about you sometimes, like you were a problem to solve instead of our grandfather." I guided them to the kitchen table, the same one where I used to serve grilled cheese sandwiches after school before their parents decided I was too much trouble. "What your parents did," I said, sitting across from them, "came from fear and greed. It had nothing to do with you. And it doesn't change how I feel about either of you." Lily sniffed, wiping her cheeks. "But they lost everything. They're in that tiny apartment now, all because of what they did to you." "They lost everything because of their choices," I said gently. "I didn't force them to lie. I didn't make them steal. That was on them." We talked for hours that afternoon, about their parents, about the years that had stretched between us, and most of all, about the future. I took them out to the workshop, explaining how the ranch ran, what needed fixing, what dreams I still had for the land. "I always thought this place would go to your father," I said quietly. "But family isn't about blood. It's about respect, loyalty, real love, the kind that doesn't come with conditions." Ethan picked up one of my old hammers, testing the weight in his hand. "Grandpa, would you teach me to build things? Like you taught Dad?" I smiled. "I'd be honored. Both of you, if you're interested. This ranch has room for all kinds of dreams." Lily nodded eagerly. "We want to learn everything. We want to understand what this place meant to you and Grandma Margaret." That evening, we stood outside watching the Colorado sunset turn the mountains purple and gold. "I'm changing my will," I told them. "This ranch, my savings, everything. It's going to you too when I'm gone. Not your parents. You." Ethan and Lily exchanged a look, and I could see it, the weight of responsibility settling on them. "We won't let you down, Grandpa," Lily said softly. "I know you won't," I said. "You're already better people than your parents ever were. You'll build something beautiful here, something that honors the past, but still grows into its own." For the first time in months, I felt something deeper than satisfaction. Hope. Real, living hope. These two kids, they were what I'd been building toward all along. The ranch would live on, just not in the hands I'd once imagined. 6 months later, I sit on my porch watching Ethan and Lily work in the garden we planted together. The man I see now isn't the broken soul who woke up in that hospital bed. He's alive again, Their laughter fills the air, music sweeter than anything I've missed in 15 years of silence. Ethan spends weekends learning carpentry in the same workshop where I taught his father. He's got steady hands and his grandmother Margaret's patience. Lily keeps the books and runs the vegetable garden, growing more tomatoes than we can possibly eat. "Grandpa," she calls from the yard. "Mrs. Carter wants to know if you can fix her deck." "Tell her Tuesday morning," I shout back, grinning. We don't need notepads anymore. No lip reading. Just conversation, natural and warm. The court cases are long over. Daniel and Lauren still make small payments each month, still living in that cramped apartment across town. Sometimes I see Daniel at the hardware store. He nods politely, but never speaks. And that's fine. I don't need apologies anymore. I've learned something far more valuable. Family isn't about DNA or last names. It's about the people who show up when it matters. The ones who celebrate your victories without expecting a cut. The ones who see you as a person worth loving, not an asset worth cashing in. Ethan and Lily show up. Mrs. Carter brings casseroles when I'm under the weather. And me? I finally sleep soundly, knowing I've built something that will last. Something honest. Something real. Something worth hearing.